Hey, what's up, Charlotte family? I hope you guys are doing good. Welcome back to another Hospice Live, Hospice 101. Myself, Charles, administrator. We got JT here. What's going on, man? How's it going?
So, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing good. We've been doing these Hospice Live 101s for the last couple months, and the goal is to really educate families, educate viewers on what hospice is, because the word hospice is super scary. It's not something that you want to say at a birthday party. Honestly, it's not something that people like to talk about, but it is necessary to understand. And so what we've been doing, we've been serving the Metroplex for over 20 years in the Dallas Metroplex. We do home health, hospice, personal care, veteran care, and palliative care. And just hospice as a whole has been misunderstood, and there's been a lot of fraud as well in the news. I'm sure we were talking to JT recently about we had a video where there was like a whole bunch of fraud in California, where it was just like 20 hospices in one place, billing out a whole bunch of fraudulent claims. And I think it just puts a big stigma, a big, like just a bad apple, right? When there's one bad apple in the batch, it doesn't have to spoil the whole batch. And so we just want to use this as a resource to help families know what is hospice and what to expect. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, JT.
Yeah, I think it kind of put another stigma on something that's already hard to talk about or that you don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been doing this. This is almost 7 months that we've been doing these live. You've been doing these longer than 7 months with
Yeah.
families. But this is kind of replicating what it looks like when your doctor or your family friend or someone first says hospice and you're reaching out, you don't know what to look for, ask.
Mm.
This is us kind of replicating that conversation online for someone so that it's a little softer before, someone like us enters your home or a nurse enters your home. So
100%. Yeah. And I think, if you're watching this for the first time, what can you expect from this live? And what you can expect is that we're going to go through a patient story. So we've taken care of thousands of patients over the years. And so what we've been doing is we've been taking a story, kind of reframing it for HIPAA purposes, retelling that story so that you can kind of sit in their shoes and be like, oh, okay, this sounds like my uncle, or this sounds like my mom, or it sounds like someone I know. And then you can actually walk through what they're going through. And what we're going to do is do a hospice 101 and education talk to that family here. And so you can kind of understand what to expect when someone or someone you love qualifies or can qualify for hospice services. So, yeah, let's dive right into it. Thanks for hopping on. We'll get into the fun stats like we always talk about, JT. So let's dive into the stats.
yeah. Before we get into the patient and the clinicals and all the details of this hospice 101, the why we're doing this or why this is important. Almost 2 million people in the U.S. have hospice each year, and so hospice is at home, sometimes in a facility if it's an assisted living or an independent living. If it's mom lives with her adult child, in the guest room. There's a lot of different places hospice can take place. It's something you pay into because it is covered by Medicare for your whole life. And so it's a benefit that you have and you deserve. It's designed to be about 6 months, but sometimes patients have a longer experience or shorter experience because none of us know, when that diagnosis presents itself, how much time someone has. But uh, because of some of those stigmas around it, and even doctors or medical professionals that don't know much about it, only 50% of people actually use their hospice benefit before they pass. And so sometimes we get a referral from a oncologist or a pulmonologist today for COPD who sees hospice as appropriate because of the quality of life that someone has. But the assumption sometimes under hospice is that means there's only a week or two left, and my dad has more time than that, and so that's why we kind of want to ease that word in, because it is designed to be a much longer period of time than that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think we talked about this a lot. Is that a lot of, and it's hard because like when doctors see that someone qualifies for hospice, sometimes it's hard to talk about it to families if they don't fully understand the benefit of it, right? And so they're in the mode of treat, 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 and so now it's like hospice. It doesn't mean giving up. It is a benefit. And I think that's where a lot of families are like, oh, I didn't understand what he meant by hospice or she meant by hospice when I got the order. And so that's kind of, why we have these. Yeah, that's so true. So, all right, let's do a real story retold. Mr. Walt Jenkins. So, as we mentioned before, we've taken care of several patients over the years, and so this is an example of a patient story that's retold. And so Walt spent 40 years as a maintenance worker for the city. He didn't make too much money, but he really didn't care. He was all about fishing, and also his wife, and he's got 3 daughters as well. And the biggest thing for him was just enjoying time at the lake, enjoying that family time, and his 3 girls and his beautiful wife. And so this is his story. And so we're going to kind of walk through specifically his story. And this month we're talking about COPD, and a lot of people may not know what COPD is, and some people may, but COPD is a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's ongoing where the lungs are damaged, right? And so there's, you think about your lungs, there's so many different pipes, if you may say, but within those pipes, there's swelling, there's inflammation, there's irritation, and those pipes become occluded or swollen, and then air can't go through. And so what happens in that case is that you have difficulty breathing at all times, right? Airflow going in and out is a struggle. And so that disease it's a tough disease, because when you can't breathe, if you ever been swimming, right, and you're in the pool and you come up and you just gouge some water, I mean, what does that bring? It brings a little fear, it brings anxiety. And so we see a lot of our patients who have COPD have that fear as well. And so, COPD affects about 1 in 8 adults over the age of 40 worldwide, which is a lot. And so we're going to talk about COPD in Walt's journey specifically. And so, yeah, JT, you want to say?
Yeah, so Walt started to experience that shortness of breath that we hear a lot with COPD patients. Usually ends up being something easy here in this story. It's, walking to the mailbox. He has to catch his breath. Some of our patients, it's going to the bathroom on their own, or doing something, easy in the kitchen, like, cleaning a dish or something like that. And so that shortness of breath, it kind of worsens over time. And so then that prompts him to go see his pulmonologist or his PCP, primary care physician, who then refers a pulmonologist to actually look into it. And so that's where that doctor, either the primary care doctor or the pulmonologist, orders home health. And so home health is a totally different service, not hospice care.
Mm-hmm.
Home health is still covered under Medicare, covered under commercial insurances, and that is focused on improvement. So it's 60 to 120 days. You have a nurse that comes into the home. Physical therapist can help with breathing techniques. Occupational therapists can come in and help with some of those daily tasks that are getting harder to do. And so what the home health goal, and it's another thing that we do at Charlin, is to be an extension of that doctor's care at home, because we've seen for several COPD patients over the year, you can see as his oxygen on here at the kitchen table. Sometimes the circus of getting the oxygen into the car or the van or the car that's not made to hold a person in an oxygen tank in the same seat, getting to the doctor, waiting in the waiting room, going back and seeing him, it can be pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
And so the doctor says, rather than come see me, once a month or however often, why don't we have home health come in, keep you safe at home, be a resource for you. And so sometimes there's improvement and you discharge home health, and now you have all these tools to stay safe at home. But sometimes, the disease runs its course, whatever it may be, which is where we kind of talk about another level of care at home.
Yeah. And home health is beautiful, because it is that support, for families and helping them through that process. But in Walt's case, it actually got worse. See, his COPD declined more, and he ended up going back and forth to the hospital several times. And with that, the doctor said, I think you may want to consider hospice. And that's kind of like, wife is like, what, and daughters are like, what is it? What do you mean? Like, his quality of life is not getting as good as it used to be. He's not able to, the disease is taking more toll on his body. So even though home health is there, even though he's taking all his medications, even though he's doing all of his treatments, it's just taking more toll on his body. And that's the hardest part to hear. And then now they hear hospice, like, what is that? What does that mean? And so that's kind of where we are now. And so if you're watching this for the first time, welcome. We've been doing this for the last several months, and we've been talking about a real story retold. So patients of ours that we've taken care of over the years retelling their story. And in this situation, Walt just got the news that hospice needs to be ordered. And so, when you hear that for the first time, it's kind of like a shock, because I think, when I grew up, I remember watching like General Hospital and One Life to Live, the soap operas. And I think anytime there was something hospice was mentioned, it was like deathbed, right? Imminent hospital, right? And so the reality of it is that there is that, right? But a lot of times it's not always that when it comes to hospice. And so when you think of hospice, we like to break it down into a couple things, right? So this is like the hospice 101. So what the best hospices do when you are trying to find a hospice or trying to learn about hospice, or you can reach out to a hospice, and what they'll do is they'll kind of educate you through what it is. And so what hospice focuses on, we're going to break it down to those three parts: where hospice happens and when hospice is appropriate. So when you're thinking about hospice and what it focuses on managing pain, symptoms, emotional and spiritual support, really based off of that diagnosis to help the family and also honor the patient's wishes. So like in Walt's case, he doesn't want to go to a facility. He wants to be at home, right? He doesn't want to do aggressive treatment anymore. He's tired. He's like, hey, like, the doc says hospice, I've lived my life. I feel like I've done everything I could, and I just want to be at home, right? And so that's kind of honoring the patient's wishes, right? And in order to honor your loved one's wishes, you also have to know their wishes. And I think that's the hardest part too, is, having those difficult conversations way before this happens, to be able to say, okay, I know what mom wants. I know what dad wants. And there's no burden on you to make weird decisions, right, outside of what they want. And then there's like JT was talking about, a sibling wishes, right? When you have like a daughter who's in Texas, and you got like a son that's in California. It's like, no, dad doesn't want that. Why would you want that? And then there's bickering going back and forth. So like that just makes it to where we see that a lot. It makes it to where it's not smooth, and you don't honor your loved one's wishes well. And that's the hardest part, JT, where else does hospice happen? Where are some other places that hospice happens?
Yeah, yeah, like we were saying earlier, it's most often, especially for our agency, at home. That's either the home that they've lived in for 40, 50 years with their wife or husband, or they've now moved into one of their children's, spare bedrooms, or live together with them. We see that a lot because the primary caregiving, as you could call it, just becomes too much for someone to drive back and forth to dad's house unless they live down the street or something like that. And so sometimes, if the family has the means for it or has planned accordingly, they may be able to afford an assisted living facility, or an independent living. And that's a little bit different how that looks, because there is a care team at the facility that can be there. But hospice can come into any of those places: group homes, assisted livings, homes,
Mhm.
and be there as a support. And so that all happens, as you can see. The third part here is when hospice is appropriate. So that's when that PCP or pulmonologist has identified, a decline in quality of life, an increase in pain, for COPD, an increase in shortness of breath or air hunger. We had a question last week, Charles, about air hunger. Someone asked what that meant. If you want to share this with
Yeah.
me.
And I think it's a hard, we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, when, the disease itself occludes the airways, right? Whether it's through inflammation or obstruction. And so the air is not going back and forth. And so when you tie that to, we talked about like swimming, and you take in some water, and it kind of gets you like anxious, because you're trying to breathe, but now imagine trying to breathe with obstruction. And so like it brings fear. And so there's a lot of techniques that Walt learned when he was on home health about pursed breathing, which is like the type of breathing that you do to really focus on quick breaths in and out. So that way you're able to calm yourself down. But air hunger is that anxiety or that fear that you get that you're not able to get enough air in. And so that happens so much. And so a lot of times with hospice or with home health, having that clinical team to help guide you through that is so helpful. Yeah, so helpful. So, but yeah, no, it's difficult, and I think when we're talking about hospice and we're talking about the parts of hospice that help families, these are the three things that we kind of like to talk about a lot. And it's the care team. Who is the care team that's going to come to you when you start hospice, right? And the supplies and DME, do I have to pay for these supplies? What are these things, right? And then the medications, how is this all? So when you think about hospice, think about the three things, the three areas specifically. So I'll dive into the care team, and then JT will hop into the DME, and then we'll go back into the medication. So when you think about your care team, think about your it's corny. I know we're in Texas, so Texas is all about football, even though we have the World Cup, right? So the World Cup, I'm a big soccer fan. So when you're thinking about the World Cup, you think about the captain, right? Who's the main person who's in charge of the team, right? Who leads the team. And so in this case, your hospice team's captain is going to be your RN or your nurse, the nurse who comes out and does the admission. So that nurse will come out, do the head to toe assessment, review everything, get to know Walt, get to know what he likes, what he doesn't like, his wishes, get to know his daughters, get to know his wife, the family. You get to know what they like, what they don't like, allergies to medications. There's everything you can think of. That nurse's job is to try to get to know Walt and his history so that she can create a good care plan for the other team members that will be involved in Walt's care under hospice. So the nurse goes out, creates a care plan. Then you got the hospice aide. So Walt's a very private man. He doesn't like someone coming in. So he may not want an aide to come out to help with bathing, but maybe down the road that may be the case, right? And so the aide comes out a couple times a week based off of the needs of Walt to do baths, bed baths, or if he's strong enough to get into the shower, right? But that's also only limited because Medicare is the one that's covering all these things. So you're looking at maybe 30 to 45 minutes of a good, clean bath, but with specifically the nurse is saying, okay, on these days, because the aide is underneath the license of the RN, the aide can only do what the RN states, right? So if Walt's saying, hey, I need you to take out my trash, I need you to come on now, I need you to help me move this around. The aide, this is all Medicare, right? Medicare dollars, and this is all clinical, right? So the aide can only do what the clinical needs of Walt's is based off of the guidance of the RN. That's a big thing we see a lot over the years, is just that confusion. But when you think of it that way, think of the captain, the RN, is leading the team, right? Also is available to families is a chaplain or a social worker. A chaplain, a lot of times with JT, we talk about a chaplain, you think of like religious, right? Religion and the cross and everything. But a lot of times this chaplain is there to support families emotionally through everything that's going on, because now Walt is losing the things that he loved to do. He can't go fishing anymore, right? That's be able to talk to someone who'll go through that, right? And then you have the social workers there to get those things in order. Let's say you did not have a will or MPOA or durable power of attorney or all those things in place. The social worker can give resources to help families through that. And then the last person, there's several other parts of the team, but this is just kind of a summary, is the hospice medical director. So Walt's PCP, pulmonologist, right? Known them for years, right? The PCP has been his PCP for 20 something years, right? And so the PCP specializes, right, in holistic care for his care, right? And so when you're talking about hospice, this is now a doctor who specializes in that terminal diagnosis of COPD. And so the hospice employs a doctor to oversee everything that's going on with him when it comes to his terminal diagnosis. And so what that does is it allows for quick responses. So now the RN is not calling the PCP and waiting to get a call back 2-3 hours later, right? Or waiting to hear from the MA at the doctor's office the RN now calls and texts the hospice doctor and says, "Hey, Walt's not doing good today. I think we should triage some medications." Coordinates with Diane, his Walt's wife, make sure that they feel comfortable with the changes, and then executes it within an hour or so. It's beautiful, and so that's why hospice was made, to help with that coordination of care instead of going back and forth to the hospital waiting to hear from MD or your PCP or a pulmonologist. Everything can be a little bit quicker, and it's a beautiful thing. So now when you think about, yeah, I'll go ahead, JT, feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you got it all. That's the who behind the team. So then as we like to call it, the what that comes with
Hmm.
hospice
Hmm.
as well. These are all the things that, because hospice is covered under Medicare Part A, which is, if you think of it like a pyramid, A is the top, like it's the highest level of care. So it's the hospital, it's a rehab facility, and it's hospice. And so the things that those services have make, the care not have much gaps compared to home health or doctor's visits or something like that. And so one of those gaps that hospice fills is durable medical equipment, or DME, and supplies. So everything you kind of see here: wipes, gloves, incontinence supplies. Not every patient needs it at first on hospice, but as the disease takes its course, underpads, chucks, diapers, things like that. And then for COPD, of course, oxygen, a hospital bed to kind of replicate that feeling in the hospital where the nurse can properly assess and position a patient, and then wheelchair, walker, things like that. All of those are provided by the hospice underneath the Medicare benefit. The other side of it is medication. So Charles talked about that quick coordination between the doctor and the nurse. That's the biggest gap that hospice covers, is when there's an exacerbation, air hunger, shortness of breath at 2, 3 in the morning. It's a scary time, and a lot of people will call 911. Ambulance comes, go to the ER. But when you do that several times, it can get exhausting. And so hospice can always have a nurse on call. There's an RN on call 24/7. So you call them in the middle of the night. They can, talk over the phone to you or your primary caregiver, or even come out and do a visit if needed. And then based on that visit and that assessment, if there's medications that need to be involved, um, they can quickly coordinate with the hospice doctor who's also on call. So sometimes that PCP, once Friday at 5 o'clock hits, you're not going to reach them again until Monday morning. And so that's where patients hesitate to lose the doctor they have all those years, because they know them so well. And of course, they know their care and their story. But for coordination of care and for the symptoms and signs that come during this season, a lot of what a good hospice agency will do is keep their doctor in the loop.
Right.
But at the end of the day, that doctor, for the betterment of the care of the patient, is going to defer to a hospice medical director, because that's, like Charles said, what they specialize in. So that's the whole team that's involved, and all of the things that come under hospice care.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did have a question, JT. Let's say I saw this commercial on while I was watching the World Cup, and there was like this really, really nice hospital bed. Like, it was like super fancy. It would like turn on a swivel. I mean, it sat it was amazing. Like, I mean, doesn't Medicare cover that, right? Or no?
Well, it depends. It is, like Charles said, Medicare dollars. So sometimes, whether it's a hospital bed like that, or some of these really fancy, electric wheelchair, can do everything on the go. Not every hospice, most hospices are not going to be able to provide something like that. If a family does have the means to kind of supplement the lifestyle, they can. But at the end of the day, the focus of the hospice agency in there is on comfort and quality of life for that patient and their disease process. Some of the extra things, like having a caregiver at the bedside 24/7, having the world-class hospital bed or lift or walker. Some of those things can be case by case. We've had several patients over the years that have needed like a special piece of equipment that sometimes a hospice can make happen, depending on the companies they work with. But ultimately, there's a standard, I'd say, like package that comes with hospice care.
Yeah, yeah. It's we always like to think about it is we always tell families utilize and maximize everything that Medicare will give you, right, under the hospice services and ask questions but then outside of that, if you want more, then families are more than welcome to purchase things to do things that they want to make sure that they feel extra to help with that comfort. But always, maximize everything that you can with insurance. And so,
Right.
but yeah, so we talked about the care team, the medications, the DME, and so now where let's say you get the order, and let's say you get everything, and now where do you start? So let's go back and talk about Walt's journey. So on home health, doing physical therapy, progressing, doing well, and then takes a decline and a dip. That may be step one, recognizing that it may be time to consider, right? He actually got step two, which was the order, right? The doctor stating, okay, I think you need, to consider hospice for your quality and comfort of life. Third step is choosing the hospice provider, which is sometimes a very tricky, a hard thing because you never really think about choosing something. You don't think about it when you're talking about hospice or someone passing. And so, take your time, uh, understand that, it's not just about specifically, anything that anyone says, do this hospice, pick this hospice. Take your time. The best hospices will do these hospice one-on-ones. The best hospices where you can look at their Google reviews, you can talk to family and friends. Take your time and make sure that you pick the right one, right? And so, and then the admission begins, which we talked about, the captain going out, doing the head to toe assessment, and then going from there. And so, yeah, JT, now who pays for all hospice? Like, if you don't like who pays for hospice services?
Yeah. No, yeah, like Charles said, we want always for families to maximize, what is theirs and what they already have covered. And so I jokingly told Charles a couple of weeks ago that like who pays for hospice honestly is the patients, but
Yeah,
not at the time of care.
yeah,
It's over your whole life paying into Medicare. But that being said, hospice is 100% covered under Medicare. So the nurse, the aide, the chaplain, the social worker, the meds, the DME, the supplies, it's a lot of things and a lot of people, but it is all covered with no out of pocket cost. And so sometimes, take Walt for example, the family is overwhelmed by how much care he's needing, how often he's needing help. They may not know what they can and can't get under Medicare and say, okay, I'm going to pay for an aide to be here 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and end up spending a lot of money. Where maybe if hospice came in, kind of rectified, here's some of the symptoms that come up, here's how you can handle them,
yeah,
here's an aid that can come out. Now, once a lot of those gaps have been filled, they can say, okay, maybe we could use help on
yeah.
Saturdays and Sundays because we have soccer games or things on the weekend.
Mhm.
Um, it's a great benefit, and it is 100% covered by Medicare. And then if there's additional help or things that are needed in the home,
Yeah.
the family can kind of go from there.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a big help for families to you understand the benefit of Medicare, and I think a lot of times there are also a lot of families who they have these diseases and these diagnoses that aren't up to Medicare's age, right? And so now they have maybe a insurance, a commercial plan, or a Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna, right, that are younger than 65. So now we usually tell families like every insurance carrier has different plans, and so if you're younger than 65, we usually say, reach out to your carrier, see the companies that are in network, what benefits that you have. And so there may be copays, right? Because it's not Medicare when it comes to younger than 65 with those insurances. So, reach out to your insurance provider and make sure that, you do have a hospice benefit within that insurance commercial plan. And so those are the ones that get a little bit tricky because you have to really go with what the insurance carrier will approve and not approve when it comes to someone who's younger than 65. So, yeah. Also, the qualifications. So, when we're talking about qualifications, in this case, um, Walt has COPD, and so with his diagnosis, he met all those criteria. But there's so many other clinical criteria because not anyone can just say I want hospice, right? You have to meet these clinical measures. So you got the heart, cardiovascular, lungs. We talked about COPD or emphysema, all the diagnoses that have to do with the lungs, the brain, dementia, Alzheimer's, right? Cancers, all those clinical diagnoses. Medicare has this list. It's called LCDs, where within these clinical areas there are qualifications that have to be met. And so the nurse, if let's say the order is written and then the nurse goes out and does the assessment and says, oh, you don't qualify, that's a hard thing to hear too, because there has to be those clinical things that meet the measures for hospice in order for someone to actually be on hospice. And then let's say your loved one lives for 6 months or even longer than that. We've had patients that actually graduate from hospice, that they just bounce back, right? And they don't qualify for hospice anymore. And that's a hard conversation to have, because then you're emotionally thinking, oh, my loved one's going to pass, and they don't pass, right? And so those are the hard conversations that hospice is there to help, navigate families and be there with them for it. And so now we fast forward to Walt now. Walt's on hospice, right? And so months later, he's at home. He's got his oxygen. He's got his hospital bed. He's got support with the hospice team and Diane, so she doesn't feel alone. She's got a nurse that she could talk to. And these are the things that we see, on hospice, where it's not that soap opera that you see, JT, at the end of life. It's like doom, right? And it can be sometimes, but most of the time it is that support. It is there to help families and to take the relief off of the loved ones, to say, okay, wow, I have some support, I have some help. And so, JT, we talked about this, the pillars. If you want to walk through that. And
Yeah, those gaps we talked about. We talked about home health care, talked about hospice care. Personal care is those, private pay aides that can come in, help with a ton of different things, not necessarily underneath the supervision of a RN like hospice's aides are. These are caregivers that can be there for companionship, safety, hygiene. And then palliative care is another service that is offered under Medicare. It depends on the agency. But it's the in between hospice and home health. So one thing we didn't touch on today with hospice care because of COPD, but there can't be life extending treatment or aggressive treatment that's being pursued. And so a simple or common example is with cancer, chemotherapy. The family eventually has to elect under Medicare either continue with chemotherapy and aggressive treatment, or elect to stay at home, stay comfortable, not necessarily give up, but not be back and forth. But if a family still wants to pursue chemotherapy and get some of that specialized care towards pain and those symptoms, palliative care is a layer on top of home health that can help with that. So yeah, as we kind of wrap up, some agencies do all these services, such as ours at Charlin. Others only do one or the other, or maybe two of these four. But like Charles said, do your research, look on Google, look at the reviews, see who's able to meet with you one-on-one, because we always say we want to empower every family and honor every story. And so you can only do that by listening. And we have some of our patients on here over the years. But there's some great stories in there. And so we're always reachable at hospice.charlin.org, or you can call our number here. One of our office staff members will pick up and be able to walk you through this. But it's not an easy season, as easy as we may make it seem to talk about or walk through. There are so many different variables and things that you may want to discuss with somebody.
No, it's just like JT said, it's not an easy road to go through. Life has its ups and downs, but just knowing that you have a support in a hospice team that can help guide you and your loved one and your family through this just lightens the blow a little bit. It's kind of like we talk about having a pilot know we're going through turbulence. It's going to come here in a second. Just buckle up. I'm with you. It's going to be a little rocky. But just knowing that there's an expert and a team of experts there who know what the clinical diagnosis is going to bring through this process just gives a little bit of peace of mind, through that. So, yeah, thanks for hopping on, guys. Looking forward to seeing you guys again next week. If you have any questions, like JT said, reach out. We're in the DFW, Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. It is hot here, and so summertime. So make sure y'all drink some water, and hydrate. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys next week. God bless. See you.